There are moments in life when Allah removes something without warning, without drama, and without giving you the explanation your heart is desperate for. One day, you are still, familiar, emotionally connected, and moving forward as if everything will continue the same way. And the next day, there is distance, silence, and a feeling that something has shifted beyond your control. Nothing exploded, nothing completely collapsed, yet Allah still stepped in and changed the direction of your path. What makes this separation painful is not just that it happened, but that it feels intentional. It feels measured. It feels like it came from a place of knowledge rather than chaos. And that is what unsettles you, because deep inside, you know this was not an accident. And it was not simply bad timing. Something was interrupted before it could continue, and you were stopped before you could move any further. Allah separates in this way, when staying would slowly damage you without you noticing, when comfort begins to replace clarity, and when attachment starts guiding your decisions more than truth. This moment is not meant to confuse or weaken you. It is meant to expose what was quietly shaping your future and to test whether you will trust Allah even when He closes a door you are still holding on to. This separation is not punishment. It is protection, and understanding that is the beginning of everything that comes next. Allah separates you to expose what you thought you needed. You did not only like what Allah removed from your life, and you did not only feel attached to it. Deep inside, you had reached a point where you believed you could not move forward without it. It had slowly shifted from something you wanted into something you felt you depended on, and that belief began shaping your choices without you even noticing it happening. You started adjusting yourself to keep it, staying quiet where you should have spoken, accepting things that made your heart uneasy, and delaying decisions you already knew were necessary, all because losing it felt more frightening than losing your peace. When something becomes a need in your mind, it gains control over you, because now your actions are no longer guided by truth, but by fear of absence. You stop asking whether it is right, healthy, or aligned, and instead you ask how to keep it, how to protect it, and how to survive without upsetting it. That is the moment Allah intervenes, not to hurt you, but to save you from building your future on something that was never meant to hold that much weight in your heart. Allah separates you to expose this false sense of necessity, to show you clearly that what you thought was holding you together was actually holding you back. The separation feels painful because it forces you to face how much power you gave away, how much of your confidence, stability, and direction you handed over to something outside of yourself. The real pain is not the absence of what left, but the realization that your strength was always meant to come from Allah and not from anything He created. Separation happens right before you betray your own conscience. Allah does not wait until you are completely broken or lost before He intervenes, because His mercy works ahead of damage, not after it. Long before people fall into regret, there is always a quiet moment where they know something is wrong, but choose not to act on it yet. That moment is not loud. It does not come with fear or panic. It comes as a gentle discomfort, a small inner resistance that keeps returning no matter how much you try to ignore it. When you reach the point where you start explaining away that discomfort instead of listening to it, you are standing very close to betraying your own conscience. You begin to say things like, "It is not that serious. It will get better later," or "Everyone goes through this," even though deep inside you already sense that something is off. This is the stage where people slowly lose themselves, not in one big mistake, but in many small justifications that feel harmless at the time. Separation happens right at this point, not because Allah wants to punish you, but because if you stayed any longer, you would have learned how to silence your inner voice completely. One more step forward would have required you to ignore what you already knew. And once that habit begins, it becomes easier to repeat. Allah stops you before that happens, before your heart becomes comfortable with going against what it was created to recognize. The pain of this separation comes from interruption, not loss, because Allah interrupted a path that was slowly teaching you how to betray yourself. What feels like something being taken away is actually your conscience being protected, because Allah knows that once a person learns to live against their inner truth, returning becomes much harder. Allah uses distance to correct distorted perception. When you are inside a situation for a long time, you stop seeing it clearly, not because you are careless, but because closeness changes how the mind works. Strong emotions soften reality. Hope fills in gaps that truth has not confirmed, and fear makes familiar things feel safer than they actually are. Over time, you begin to look at everything through feeling instead of understanding, and that slowly distorts how you judge what is happening around you. Distance is what corrects this distortion, because clarity does not come while you are emotionally entangled. As long as you are close, your mind keeps protecting what your heart is attached to, even when there are signs that something is wrong. You explain things away. You focus on potential instead of patterns, and you tell yourself that what bothers you is small or temporary, even though it keeps returning again and again. When Allah creates distance, He is not removing comfort. He is restoring accuracy. Once separation happens, the emotional noise settles, and you start noticing things that were always there but hard to face before. Conversations replay differently. Behaviors make more sense. And moments that once felt confusing suddenly become clear. What you thought was complicated often turns out to be simple once emotion is no longer controlling your vision. This is why clarity often arrives after loss, not before it, because some truths cannot be seen from inside the storm. Allah uses distance to return your sight to its natural state, so you can finally understand what was real, what was imagined, and what was quietly draining you while you were trying to hold everything together. Separation breaks emotional dependence, not connection. Not every attachment is built on love or care. Some attachments form because they help you manage emotions you have not yet learned to hold on your own. Without realizing it, you may start using someone or something to calm your anxiety, lift your mood, or give you a sense of stability. And over time, that support quietly turns into emotional dependence. You do not notice it happening because it feels comforting, but the moment that support is threatened, fear appears, and that fear reveals how much balance you placed outside yourself. When separation happens, it often feels like withdrawal rather than heartbreak, because your emotional system was relying on something external to stay regulated. The restlessness, the emptiness, and the sudden feeling of instability are not signs that you lost something essential. They are signs that your inner balance had not yet been fully developed. Allah removes what you leaned on so you can learn steadiness that does not disappear when circumstances change. This does not mean connection is wrong or that closeness is dangerous. It means connection must come after stability, not instead of it. When your calm depends on something outside you, your judgment weakens, your boundaries soften, and your fear of loss grows stronger. Allah separates you to rebuild emotional strength from within, so that future connections are chosen from peace rather than from need, and shared from balance rather than from dependence. Allah separates you when staying would quietly shrink you. Sometimes Allah removes you from a place not because it is loud, harmful, or openly wrong, but because it is slowly making you smaller. Nothing dramatic is happening. There are no clear arguments, no obvious conflicts, and no single moment you can point to and say, "This is where everything went wrong." That is why staying feels reasonable, and that is why leaving feels confusing, because on the surface, everything looks fine. Yet quietly, you begin to notice changes in yourself that are easy to ignore, but hard to undo. You speak less about what you need. You accept situations that once made you uncomfortable, and you start adjusting your standards just to keep things calm. You tell yourself that compromise is maturity, that patience means endurance, and that peace means silence, even when something inside you feels increasingly heavy. Allah separates you at this stage because He sees the long-term effect of staying in something that slowly reduces you. Growth is not only about avoiding harm, it is also about avoiding erosion. When your confidence, clarity, or self-respect is being worn down a little at a time, the damage does not feel urgent, but it becomes deep. Allah removes you before that quiet shrinking becomes your new normal, not as a punishment, but as protection of who you are becoming. Separation clears space for what cannot arrive yet. There are times when Allah wants to bring something new into your life, but there is simply no space for it to settle properly. Your mind is full, your emotions are occupied, and your attention is tied to things that already demand too much energy. Even if something better were placed in front of you, you would not be able to receive it with clarity or care, because your inner space is already crowded. Separation creates room where there was once noise. When something leaves, it feels like emptiness at first, but that emptiness is not loss, it is clearance. It is the space where peace can return, where understanding can grow, and where new direction can take shape. Allah removes what consumes your emotional capacity so that what is meant for you does not arrive into confusion or distraction. Many people mistake this empty phase as delay or abandonment, but in reality, it is preparation. Just as a container must be cleared before it can be filled properly, your inner world must be freed from attachment and emotional clutter before something lasting can enter. Allah does not remove things to leave you with nothing. He removes them to make sure what comes next can finally stay. Allah separates you to return decision-making back to you. When you stay connected to something for too long, especially when emotions are involved, your ability to choose freely begins to fade without you realizing it. Decisions stop coming from inner clarity and start forming around reactions, adjustments, and expectations. You think before speaking, you hesitate before acting, and you constantly measure your choices based on how they will be received rather than whether they are right for you. Separation restores that lost authority. Without the constant presence of someone or something influencing your direction, you begin hearing your own judgment again. You no longer wait for signals, approval, or reassurance before moving. Slowly, you start choosing because something feels aligned, not because you are afraid of losing connection or creating discomfort. Allah separates you to rebuild this internal leadership because elevation requires people who can stand firmly in their own decisions. When your sense of direction comes from within, you stop bending under pressure and stop shaping yourself to fit what surrounds you. This is how confidence becomes rooted and how future choices become deliberate instead of reactive. The test ends when you stop seeking reversal. The separation continues to hurt as long as part of you is secretly waiting for it to undo itself. Even when you move forward on the outside, your heart may still be looking backward, hoping for a message, a sign, or a change that restores what was removed. That hidden hope keeps the pain alive because your energy is split between accepting what is and longing for what used to be. When you stop asking for the situation to reverse, something inside you finally relaxes. Not because you no longer care, but because you are no longer fighting what Allah has already decided. Acceptance does not arrive suddenly. It settles slowly, replacing resistance with clarity and heaviness with calm. You begin to see that the separation was not meant to be fixed, but understood. This is where the test ends, because the purpose of the separation was never to see how much you could suffer, but to see whether you would trust Allah's wisdom, even when it closed a door you were still holding on to. The moment you release the need for things to return to how they were, your heart opens to what is meant to come next, and peace replaces the struggle without any announcement. Allah did not separate you because you failed, and He did not remove something because you were unworthy. He separated you because staying would have slowly taken you away from yourself, and Allah does not allow what He loves to be reduced in silence. What feels like an ending was actually a correction, and what felt like loss was the moment your direction was protected. This separation was never meant to leave you empty. It was meant to return you to your center, to your judgment, and to your trust in Allah alone. Once you stop measuring your future by what left and start walking forward with what you learned, you will realize something important and freeing. Nothing essential was taken from you, because what was truly meant for you does not leave. It waits until you are ready to receive it without losing yourself again.